In this session, we are going to see Robert Browning's poem Andrea del Sarto. Before we move on to the poem, let us discuss Robert Browning's life and his works. As we all know, Robert Browning is one of the most prominent among the Victorian poets. Browning completely dedicated himself to literature. He began his literary career even when he was a boy. He wrote a number of poems like Paracelsus, Pauline, Sordello, etc. He married Elizabeth Barrett in 1846. She was also a poet. Since the match was disapproved by Elizabeth's father, they went to Italy and lived there happily until her death in 1861. Robert Browning has written a number of poems, and the most characteristic poems of Browning are Pippa Passes, Opt Vogles, My Last Duchess, Andrea del Sarto, A Grammarian's Funeral, etc., besides a number of dramatic lyrics. Browning has made distinct contribution to English poetry. His poems are noted for their deep philosophy, a psychological analysis of character, and for the use of dramatic monologue. Browning excels in the presentation of abnormal characters and in treating psychological subtleties. Andrea del Sarto is one of the best dramatic monologues which brings out the consummate skill of Browning. Dramatic monologue is a form in which the speaker is revealing his mind at a particular moment to a listener. The presence of a listener is the most important element in the dramatic monologue. The manner of the speaker's revelations is controlled to some extent by the nature of the listener. It is interrupted by the listener by word and action. It reveals the speaker's character and it is psychological and analytic. The poem Andrea del Sarto is included in the collection of poems called Men and Women. It is about the Florentine painter Andrea del Sarto, who was usually known as the faultless painter. The poem is in the form of a monologue. Andrea del Sarto expresses his great love for his most beautiful but unfaithful wife Lucretia. He declares how he had forsaken all his prospectors in Paris for the pleasure of living with his wife according to her whims. He had the faultless technique of drawing, but he could not achieve the real perfection because of his unrequited infatuation for Lucretia. The wife uses him only as a source to get money and without any scruple hands it over to her lover to clear his gambling debts. Andrea del Sarto, the flawless painter, is characterized by a spiritless temperament, a sense of fatalism, a consciousness of his own weakness, and an unmanly resignation. Andrea did not possess that spiritual greatness of great painters because of his blind infatuation for his wife. The deterioration of Andrea's character begins with his infatuation for his unscrupulous wife Lucretia. He enjoyed the golden days of his artist's life in the court of King Francis in Paris, but his great infatuation for Lucretia made him leave Paris and misappropriate the money given to him by Francis I to buy some pictures. Andrea is full of remorse for his faithless action. At night, the bricks in the wall appear like gold and remind him of the gold he has stolen from Francis. He is afraid to meet the French lords and dare not go out in the streets. Browning's philosophy of life and his views on art are very well brought out through his portrayal of life and tragedy of Andrea del Sarto. Andrea failed in life both as a man and as an artist since he was blind to the higher values of life and art on account of his blind infatuation for his wife. He did not possess that imaginative or spiritual excellence which his contemporaries possessed, since he followed his instinct. Andrea chose his earthly love rather than heavenly aspirations. Throughout the poem, we get scattered observations which reveal Browning's philosophy. We find a strong sense of fatalism in Andrea's words. Love, we are in God's hand. God is responsible for the life we lead. He lays the fetters on us, though we think we are free. Again, when he thinks of his failure because of the lack of encouragement from Lucretia, he says, all is as God overrules. He observes that in this world, those who can do not have the will to do, and those who have the willpower do not have the ability to do things. Hence, life appears to be a struggle of such half men. Browning brings out his idea that God is just when he speaks of the punishment of Andrea. Andrea had stolen King Francis' money in order to build a house. They thought of having a happy time in the house, but it turned out to be a melancholy house. Finally, a note of resignation is sounded when Andrea says, let each one bear his lot. Andrea knows that many painters strive hard to achieve the perfection of Andrea's art, but still their works have that inspiration which is lacking in Andrea. Hence, he feels that their lesser achievement together with their inspiration is greater than Andrea's better achievement in perfection without inspiration. Browning suggests the idea that it is better to have a high ideal and fail to achieve it than to have a low aim and realize it. Browning indicates some of the conditions necessary for great art by narrating the drawbacks in Andrea's painting. A spiritual elevation of the mind is necessary for the production of a great work of art. Andrea has nothing of the spiritual exaltation. He has sold his art to the whims and fancies of his wife. There burns a truer light of God in the pictures of Raphael and Angelo, but Andrea, with all his flawless technique, lacks this true inspiration. Hence, he has failed as an artist. Thus, Browning expresses his philosophy of life and art in this poem. Browning obtained the main source for the life of Andrea from Vasari's Lives of 70 Most Eminent Painters. Thank you.